I always sat in the same spot by the window at our favorite weekend brunch place, where the eggs were overpriced and the family drama was free refills. That morning, the coffee in front of me had already gone cold, but I kept stirring it anyway. Muscle memory, a small ritual that kept my hands busy while the rest of me disappeared into the background. No one noticed, not even when Mia laughed so hard at her own joke that half the cafe turned. My older sister, in her typical designer dress and polished voice, loved attention the way plants love sunlight. She basked in it. "You really stuck with that data thing, huh?" she said, swirling her mimosa like it held the punchline. "It's kind of cute how you're still figuring out what you want to do and you're, 30? 34 actually. But sure, go off." No one else laughed. Just Mia, grinning into the void of her own performance. My mom gave a half-hearted Mia, "Please," while my dad decided his poached eggs needed urgent commentary. I didn't look up, didn't flinch, just kept stirring the coffee that had long since lost its heat like every other conversation at this table. See, they thought I had nothing to say because I chose silence. But that silence? It was where I built a world they could never imagine, one that didn't need applause to exist. 5 years ago, in a cramped co-working space with cables snaking across the floor and too much caffeine in our systems, my best friend Nate and I wrote the first line of code for what would become Insightive, a real-time behavioral analytics engine. It was now integrated into banks, hospitals, and even state-run agencies. Today, I'm the co-founder of a company valued at just over $90 million. But no one in my family knows, and they don't need to, because I'm not on the website. I don't show up in articles. In every public-facing document, Nate's the face, the spokesperson, the genius. And me? I preferred it that way. The quiet architect in the shadows. Until now. Because the sister who once laughed at my hobby is applying for a job at the company I helped build. "I just sent out a few resumes," Mia said, sipping her mimosa like it was scripted. "Insightive? They're hiring for a finance lead. Apparently some boutique firm with big contracts. I could fix their budgeting in my sleep." My hands paused over the coffee. Just for a second. She had no clue. I didn't respond, just nodded like I was impressed. Like I didn't have the power to approve or reject her application with one click. It wasn't even satisfying. Just surreal. My mind flashed back to my 12th birthday. Mia had just won some regional dance title. She burst into the room with her trophy held high, and everyone jumped up to hug her. Meanwhile, my cake candles melted. No one noticed I hadn't made a wish. And I didn't. I just took my gifts, retreated to my room, and opened the second-hand laptop Dad gave me. That night, I stayed up sketching data models, while everyone downstairs toasted to Mia's bright future. That's when I learned applause doesn't build empires. Focus does. As we got older, the pattern held. Mia went on to study fashion marketing, landed a few short-lived gigs, was featured in some lifestyle magazine spread that Mom printed and laminated. I went to a tech institute no one remembered the name of, built prototypes that got laughed at by classmates, then noticed by venture capitalists. And when Nate and I launched Insightive, all we had were 2 second-hand laptops and one wild idea that we could predict decision behavior with algorithmic precision. By year 3, we were profitable. By year 4, we landed a deal with one of the biggest insurance firms in the country. And now, 5 years in, Mia was walking straight into the walls I built, without knowing I was behind the glass. The irony? Mia had once told me, real jobs involve people, not screens. Funny, considering the screen she was applying through would lead right to me. That evening, back in my apartment top floor, quiet, glass windows overlooking the rainy Seattle skyline, I logged into our internal HR dashboard. There it was, candidate Mia Landon. Resume, polished but fluff-heavy. Experience, accountant at 2 failed firms. Cover letter, brimming with buzzwords. Innovative thinker, financial visionary, dedicated to excellence. Internal notes, confident communicator, seems a good fit for budgeting team. Recommending for second round. I stared at her photo. She looked so sure of herself, like the job was already hers. I hovered over the approve button and clicked. Why? Because this wasn't about revenge. Not yet. I didn't need to destroy her. I just needed her to walk into the arena, thinking it was hers to conquer, unaware I'd drawn every line on the floor. Within Insightive, I was L. Just a quiet consultant who worked off-site and signed off on budgets late at night. No one except Nate knew who I really was, and that suited me just fine. The next week, I did what I always did. Worked from my apartment, ran back-end audits, optimized our machine learning model, but I also tapped into the company's internal video stream. Only a few of us had access. Mia appeared on the ninth floor kitchen cam, stylish as ever. Her heels clicked confidently against the marble. This company's so secretive, she told someone by the espresso machine. Rumor is, one of the founders is basically a ghost. Doesn't even show up to board meetings. She laughed. I did too. Later that day, Nate FaceTimed me. Your sister's something, he said, amused. She's doing fine? Yeah. Knows her way around spreadsheets. Bit arrogant though, I smiled. She always was. Think she's gonna figure it out? If she does, it won't be because I told her. The game had just started. And Mia? She hadn't even read the rules. Mia's first week at Inside have passed without much fanfare. She adapted fast, like she always did, slipping into team meetings with her usual charm and confidence. She had that way of speaking like every word was already approved by a crowd, rehearsed and delivered for effect. From the cameras I quietly tapped into, I watched her as she led her first departmental budget review. Her tone was polished, her ideas decent, not groundbreaking, but polished enough to impress people who didn't look too deeply. Most of her teammates were warm, a little curious about her resume, but no one questioned the source of her sudden opportunity. And why would they? She fit the role on paper and on the surface. That's all anyone cared about. What they didn't see, what Mia never noticed, was the quiet pattern that ran through her reports. My signature. L. The one name that appeared in every major decision chain. She never asked about it, not at first. But I could tell the dots were forming slowly. Mia had never been the type to care about names behind the curtain. She focused on results, applause. But something shifted during her third week, when one of her proposals for adjusting the corporate travel allowance got bounced back by me. It wasn't a harsh rejection, just a quiet correction with notes. Budget inconsistencies, missing forecasts. She received the document and frowned, probably for the first time realizing that someone she didn't know had veto power. I could almost hear her thinking, who is this L person, and why does she get the final say? That afternoon, Nate messaged me. She's starting to notice. Asked someone in finance if L was a real person, or just some internal compliance bot. I smiled, let her wonder. It wasn't about deception, it was about timing. I wanted to see who she became when she thought no one important was watching. She kept pushing forward, unaware that I reviewed every single number she submitted. Some weeks, I even improved her work, silently correcting errors before they went live to investors or department leads. I didn't do it for her, I did it for the company I helped build. Inside of deserves solid, reliable numbers, not ego-wrapped projections. But over time, Mia's proposals got tighter. Her tone softened. Fewer buzzwords, more structure. I couldn't tell if she was growing or simply adapting to the invisible resistance. Either way, it intrigued me. One night, as rain traced soft trails across my window, I logged into our archive server to pull monthly performance reports. I noticed a flagged access attempt in the audit log. Someone had tried to view the origin documents for our founding board records. My heart stilled. User ID Landon. She had found the back door. Maybe by accident, maybe not. I double-checked the logs. She hadn't made it through. The file required dual-key authentication, mine and Nate's. But the interest was noted. She was looking for something. Or someone. A few days later, the confirmation came in an unexpected way. I was in the 10th floor server room late at night, verifying patch updates, when I heard the sharp click of heels echoing down the corridor. A door creaked. I turned and there she was, Mia, frozen, staring at me like she'd just caught a ghost in real life. L? She asked, voice sharp with suspicion. I didn't blink. That's me. She narrowed her eyes. What are you doing down here? This is restricted access. I have access, I said simply, wiping my hands on a microfiber cloth. You're in management? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Before I could reply, Nate appeared from behind a side panel, holding a hard drive. L, can you check this for integration errors? He passed it to me without looking at Mia. She froze. I watched her brain catch up to what she was seeing. The woman she thought was drifting through life now standing shoulder to shoulder with the CEO. Wait, she whispered, almost to herself. You're the L from all the approvals. The one in the internal emails. I gave a small smile, just enough to soften the blow but not enough to comfort her. Yes, I'm the co-founder. Her jaw tightened. There was so much in her silence, shock, disbelief, maybe even a little shame. I didn't wait for a reply. I turned back to Nate, nodded, and walked out. Let her sit with it. That weekend, I stayed offline. Let the air settle. Let her make the next move. I didn't want confrontation. I didn't need validation. I wanted clarity, hers, not mine. When I returned to work Monday night, There was a flagged message from HR Internal Escalation. Request for clarification on budget authority. File contained a timestamp and a document history trail. My name all over it. Mia had gone digging again. This time deeper. I stared at the message for a while, my cursor blinking at the top of the response window. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The paper trail was already loud enough. That same evening, I received a calendar notification. Unusual. A one-on-one request. Title: Request to connect Mia. Location: 8th floor quiet room. Time: 7:30 p.m. I hovered over the accept button, then clicked. No comments, just confirmed. I arrived 2 minutes early. She was already there, seated at the far end of the room, a folder on the table. Her eyes flicked up when I walked in. "You built this," she said, skipping any greeting. I nodded. "From scratch," she added. Not a question, a realization. You signed my paycheck," she continued, as if putting the pieces together out loud would help her process it faster. I didn't interrupt. She leaned back. "All those years I thought you were wasting your time, playing with computers, not doing anything that mattered." Her voice broke slightly on that last word. "But you were building a whole company. While I was out here trying to impress people with resumes and failed side projects, you were building something real." I waited. She looked at me. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone?" "Because I didn't need to," I said. "I didn't want to win the crowd. I wanted to win the game." For a long second, she just stared. Then quietly, she opened the folder and slid a document toward me. It was a budget proposal. Strong, focused, cleaner than any of her past work. "I want to lead this initiative," she said. "No shortcuts. Just let me prove I can do something without the spotlight." I studied the numbers. No ego in the projections. Just good work. When I looked up, I didn't see the sister who used to roll her eyes at my late nights or call me a hermit. I saw someone recalibrating. Someone trying to earn, not demand, a place. I signed the bottom line and pushed it back. She looked at the signature for a second, then nodded. No thank you, no apology, but also no pretense. And that was enough for now. As I walked back to my office, the glass walls around me reflected not just my own silhouette, but a version of Mia I hadn't met in years. One who wasn't performing, one who had finally looked past the glitter to see what was real. Maybe we weren't on opposite sides anymore. Maybe we were just two very different people, learning how to stand in the same room without stepping on each other's voice. After our meeting in the quiet room, something changed, not instantly, not dramatically, but noticeably. Mia didn't try to force anything. She didn't come around asking questions or pretending we'd suddenly become close. Instead, she returned to her role with a sharper focus, more grounded. It wasn't the kind of shift most people noticed. But I did. She started arriving earlier, left later. She listened more than she spoke during meetings, asked for feedback without trying to control the narrative. For someone who once believed silence was weakness, she was learning to sit in it, and that was something I never thought I'd see. I didn't check on her often. I kept my distance, as I always had. Still logged in late, still signed off from my apartment overlooking Lake Union. But now, occasionally, I'd open her files just to see where her mind was going. And slowly, her work stopped needing corrections. The sharp corners had softened. Her projections were tight. Her notes thoughtful. She had started double-checking before submitting, not just tossing drafts over with the confidence that someone else would clean it up. Maybe she finally understood that competence isn't about sounding like, everything. It's about making sure you're right before anyone asks. A few weeks later, she proposed a system-wide adjustment to how department budgets were forecasted, an idea I'd been mulling over myself for months. She presented it to her team, clean and confident, but without that showy edge. Just facts. A subtle tone shift. One of our newer analysts, Rachel, leaned over during the meeting and whispered to her, "You've really helped us get organized. No one pushed for clarity before." Mia smiled, but didn't gloat. That was when I knew. She was no longer performing, she was contributing. Around that time, I decided to approve a new internal mentorship initiative, one that Mia had quietly championed through finance, designed to support junior analysts and interns, particularly women entering tech roles from non-traditional backgrounds. She didn't advertise it, didn't post about it on LinkedIn, just sent the proposal to HR with a subject line that read, "Touch the screen, touch the future." The tagline made me pause. At the bottom of the document, under a short paragraph about why she believed in building others up, there was a single line in italics, inspired by the quiet mission of L. Green. I sat there in my apartment, mug in hand, staring at that sentence longer than I probably needed to. It didn't feel like praise. It felt like recognition, not loud, just honest. I didn't reply to her proposal directly. I approved it within the hour. That was my answer. Later that week, I passed by the break room late in the evening. Most of the office had cleared out. Mia was still there, pouring hot water into a glass tea carafe, her hair pulled into a low bun, face tired but calm. When she turned and saw me, we both froze, but only for a breath. She didn't look away. She just nodded once. I returned the nod and kept walking. Nothing needed to be said. Not anymore. That night, something small shifted inside me. For years, I had defined strength as distance. If no one could reach me, they couldn't hurt me. But now, watching Mia evolve, not because I demanded it, but because she chose it, that made me wonder if letting people grow beside you might be another kind of strength. A quieter one, but powerful all the same. The next week passed without any dramatic turns. Just ordinary days filled with meetings, code reviews, system updates, budget approvals. The calm rhythm of a company in motion. Then came the gala, our 5-year milestone. Nate wanted something memorable, a public reveal, a way to honor the people behind the scenes. For years I had avoided the spotlight. No photos, no interviews, no speeches. But this time, I felt something pull me toward the stage. Not because I wanted applause, but because I no longer feared being seen. The event was held in a glass atrium overlooking Lake Union. Soft light from crystal chandeliers spilled across the marble floor, reflecting in the lake like tiny stars caught underwater. I stood in the dressing room, smoothing out the folds of my black dress, minimalist and simple, the kind that didn't ask for attention, but still held quiet elegance. My hair was pinned neatly, makeup barely there, just enough to soften the tired edges around my eyes. Nate knocked lightly before stepping in. "You ready?" I didn't answer right away. I looked at myself in the mirror, the woman staring back, no longer hiding behind work schedules or anonymous emails. She looked tired, yes, but steady. Capable. "Not really," I finally said. He chuckled. "You're not stepping out," he said. "You're stepping up." We waited backstage as the MC wrapped up the opening speech. Then the lights dimmed, the music faded, and the crowd hushed. Please welcome the co-founders of Insightive, Nathan Rice and Elle Green. Applause rolled through the room, warm and electric. I stepped into the light. It was surreal. Dozens of faces turned toward me, eyes curious, some shocked. A few whispered to each other, and then I saw her. Mia, standing near the back of the room, a champagne flute untouched in her hand. Her expression, frozen somewhere between surprise and realization. I didn't linger. Nate spoke first, sharing our origin story, how we started with nothing but an idea and old laptops in his mother's garage. He talked about late nights, burnt coffee, failed prototypes. I smiled quietly, remembering all of it. The crashes, the breakthroughs, the quiet thrill of watching something you built actually work. Then he passed me the mic. The room went still. "Hi," I began, voice even but soft. "I'm Elle. For most of you, this is the first time you've actually seen me. I'm usually somewhere in the background by choice. I've always believed that the best work doesn't need a spotlight. But tonight, I wanted to be here, not for recognition, for gratitude." A quiet wave of applause followed, not loud, just warm, real. I glanced toward the back. Mia hadn't moved, but her eyes hadn't left me either. As I stepped off stage, dozens of people came to speak to me. Colleagues, department heads, interns who thought I was a myth. One engineer laughed. "We used to joke Elle was a code name for a committee. Can't believe you're real." I smiled, shook hands, accepted compliments with a nod, but my mind kept drifting back to Mia. When I finally looked for her again, she was gone. The space where she'd stood was empty. I didn't know when she left, or how much she heard, but something told me it wasn't over. That night, I returned home, kicked off my heels, and sat quietly in my apartment, scrolling through messages on my phone. "Congratulations. You were amazing. So proud of you." Even my parents had texted. My father wrote, "We watched the live stream. Never been prouder." My mother followed with, "You looked so confident. It was beautiful." But there was nothing from Mia. Not a word. I didn't feel hurt. Just hollow, as if something important had started to bloom but was still buried under soil. I played the speech back once on the company site, not for vanity, just to listen, to hear the tone, to check if the message I meant to give had actually landed. As the camera panned across the audience, I saw her again, just before she left. Her eyes weren't angry. They weren't even confused. They were searching. And in that look, I saw the question she hadn't yet asked out loud. Who have I been looking at all these years, without really seeing? 2 days after the gala, I returned to the office earlier than usual. Not for a meeting, not for approvals or code reviews, but for something I hadn't planned, at least not until the night I stood in that spotlight and realized how much weight I'd been carrying in silence. There was a drawer in the 10th floor conference room that barely anyone used anymore, Inside it, beneath old training manuals and dusty extension cords, I found the small walnut box I'd kept since college. It was the one thing I had never lost track of, not during moves, not during company expansions, not even when I thought about leaving Seattle once, just to start over somewhere anonymous. I opened it and took out a navy linen covered notebook, a black ink pen, and one blank card. It took me over an hour to write just a few lines. Nothing poetic, no grand speech, just honesty. Mia, thank you for what you've brought to this company. You're more capable than you know, and I believe you'll go far. I'm proud to work with you even if we began in silence. L. I slipped the card into the notebook and handed it to the internal delivery assistant with a quiet instruction not to include a sender name. I didn't expect a response. I wasn't doing it for closure. The notebook wasn't an olive branch or an invitation to nostalgia. It was a quiet door, left open, no pressure to walk through, but waiting if she ever chose to. The rest of the week passed, like most others, back-to-back system audits, infrastructure planning meetings, late-night security patch approvals. But I noticed small things. Mia stopped leaning back in meetings like she was waiting for applause. She started sitting up, notebook open, pen moving constantly. She asked sharper questions, focused ones, not to impress, but to understand. And then, one afternoon, I paused in the hallway outside a glass-walled conference room and watched as she presented a revised budget strategy for an AI project that had gone over cost. She spoke clearly, not loudly. She referenced reports I had personally drafted and corrected without knowing she would be the one to implement them months later. She gave credit to her junior analysts. She didn't interrupt. When someone challenged her on a projected return rate, she didn't defend with ego. She clarified with data. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. I just stood outside, listening, and nodded to myself. Whatever she was becoming, she was earning it. The following Monday, HR circulated a proposal for a new internal sponsorship initiative targeting female interns entering technical roles. It was spearheaded by Mia, supported by multiple departments, and tied to our CSR budget. The initiative title stopped me cold. Touched the screen, touched the future. And beneath it, in small italics, inspired by the quiet mission of L. Green. I stared at the proposal longer than I probably should have, not because it praised me, but because it didn't try to fix what couldn't be fixed. It simply saw something I had kept hidden for years and called it valuable. That evening, I stopped by the pantry on my way out. Mia was there again, pouring hot water into a tea carafe. We both paused when our eyes met. For a split second, I thought she might look away. But she didn't. Instead, she said, without hesitation, "The pen is beautiful. And the notebook. I've started writing a few pages." I turned slightly, surprised. "I'm glad you liked it." She gave a small nod, her voice lower than usual. "I don't think I ever really understood you, or maybe I just never tried." I didn't respond right away. I could hear the quiet hum of the fridge behind her, the muted clink of porcelain in the sink. Then she said something else. "You didn't have to give me a chance, but you did. And you never threw it in my face. You never tried to make me feel small, even when you could have. That says more about you than anything else ever could." For the first time, I didn't see the teenager who once rolled her eyes at my outdated clothes or mocked me for skipping her birthday parties to finish coding projects. I saw someone learning to let go of pride. Someone who wasn't just acting different but thinking differently. I didn't need an apology. I just needed that shift in her eyes. That willingness to stop performing and start seeing. "I don't know if I can make it right," she said, eyes dropping to the rim of her cup. "But I'll try." I nodded. "We don't need to tally up the past. We just start from today." We stood there for a second longer, not awkwardly, but quietly. Like two people learning how to share air without turning it into a contest. That week, Mia changed in small, measurable ways. She stopped interrupting younger analysts. She began asking junior staff if they wanted to shadow her during budget reviews. She no longer flinched when someone questioned her reports. She corrected what needed correcting and moved on. And I changed too. I started showing up to briefings, not to take the stage, but to stand beside my team. I stopped hiding during department walkthroughs and began talking directly to interns. I started answering questions instead of redirecting them. I even spoke to a group of visiting students from a local tech program, something I never imagined myself doing. Not because I didn't want to, but because I never thought I had anything to offer beyond code. "I'm not here to talk about success," I told them, standing in front of a whiteboard smudged with markers. "I'm here to talk about silence, the kind that makes room for growth, not absence. You don't have to be loud to matter. You just have to build something real." A few days later, as I was leaving the office, I passed the hallway near the recognition wall and updated quarterly list of standout contributors. I didn't usually check it, but this time something caught my eye. Mia's name was there. First line, voted by peers. Not by execs. Not by me. When I turned, she was already standing there, reading the wall. Her expression was quiet, thoughtful. Then she turned and looked at me, not with surprise, not with pride, but with something simpler. Acknowledgement. "Thank you for not giving up on me," she said, voice steady. I smiled. "We're just getting started." And somehow, that was true. For the first time in our lives, we weren't standing on opposite sides of a room competing for space. We were both just there, present, listening. And that presence was more healing than any apology either of us could have spoken. Sunday morning rolled around with that same slow rhythm. It always carried light drizzle tapping against the cafe windows, the smell of warm waffles floating through the air, and the clatter of mismatched plates echoing through conversations. We hadn't missed a weekend brunch in years, not even during the messy ones, the ones where no one really said what they were thinking, but everyone showed up anyway, like we were keeping a fragile tradition alive by sheer force of routine. The table was the same, long, slightly wobbly in the middle, surrounded by the same dark wood chairs with fading blue cushions. My parents were already seated when I arrived, my mother chatting with Aunt Laura about her new flower beds, my father buried in a menu he never actually read. Uncle Henry was stirring his tea with the wrong end of his spoon again. Mia came in 5 minutes late, but something about her was different. Not the dramatic kind of different that needed an announcement, but the kind that made you look twice. She wore a simple white blouse, dark jeans, no heels, no statement earrings, no layers of polished performance. Her hair was tied back loosely, not messily, just real. She didn't try to take the spotlight or slide into it sideways. She just found a seat and nodded toward me, quiet but deliberate. I returned the nod, not because anything needed to be said, but because nothing did. The conversation meandered, touching on weather, family gossip, a neighbor who apparently painted his mailbox neon green. Then Uncle Henry, as if on cue, turned to me and asked the question he always asked, as though time hadn't moved and nothing in my life had shifted. "So, Elle, are you still doing that little freelance thing? What was it again? Something with computer codes?" I smiled, not out of irritation, but because I'd expected it. Some things don't evolve with you, and that's okay. But before I could answer, Mia set down her coffee and turned her head, not sharply but firmly. "Uncle," she said, voice calm but clear, "Elle is the smartest person I've ever known. Without her, I wouldn't be where I am today." The words didn't ring with drama or defensiveness. They came out like a fact, solid, unapologetic. All eyes turned to her. I felt my breath catch, just slightly, as she continued. "I used to think she was quiet because she didn't know what to say. Turns out, she was just building things the rest of us couldn't even imagine. She's not loud because she doesn't need to be. She acts. She creates. And she's one of the few people I've met who doesn't need applause to do something meaningful." Uncle Henry blinked, unsure if he was supposed to laugh. Aunt Laura gave a quiet nod. My mother, without looking at me, reached over and gently placed her hand on mine, fingers soft but steady. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. In that moment, I felt more seen than any headline or gala spotlight could have ever made me feel. Not because of the compliment, but because it came from someone who used to measure value by volume. And now she had chosen stillness. The conversation returned to safer topics after that: vacation plans, a cousin's new job, the price of avocados. But something had shifted. The current beneath the surface had changed direction. After the plates were cleared and coffee refills offered, people began trickling away from the table. Hugs were exchanged. Keys jingled. My mother handed my father his umbrella even though the rain had stopped. As I stood to leave, bag slung over my shoulder, Mia approached. She didn't smile. She didn't try to joke. She simply looked at me, her voice soft but unwavering. "You don't have to forgive me," she said. Not as a plea, but as a confession. But I'll never be the same person again. I turned to her, not surprised but moved in a way I hadn't anticipated. The part of me that used to flinch at her presence didn't flinch now. The part that used to ache for acknowledgement didn't ache either. I gave her a genuine smile, the kind that didn't stretch too wide or hide too much. "I know," I said, "and I never needed you to apologize." We walked out together in silence, not side by side but in rhythm. The kind of silence that doesn't separate but settles. Outside, the sidewalk was still damp, glistening beneath soft sunlight that peeked through the clouds. I turned toward my car, but paused. She turned too, as if expecting me to say more. I didn't. I just nodded once, and she nodded back. We weren't sisters trying to fix years of bruised egos and mismatched dreams. We were women who had walked through different kinds of fire and learned, in our own quiet ways, how to stop adding fuel. That afternoon, I went home and made myself tea. Nothing fancy. Just a familiar blend I kept in a drawer with old cables and notebooks that had been with me longer than some friends. I curled up on the couch with the cup in my hands and opened my laptop. I didn't check budgets. I didn't respond to tickets. I just stared out the window, watching the lake shimmer like silver under the sky. A notification popped up. Message from Nate. Heard brunch wasn't half bad today. I smirked, typing back, not bad. Maybe we're evolving. Another message followed. You okay? I looked at the screen, paused, then typed, yeah. I think something important happened. Not loud, but important. He didn't respond right away, and he didn't have to. That's how we worked. Just like me and Mia were starting to, not by rewriting everything that came before, but by accepting that sometimes a new chapter doesn't erase the old ones. It just writes over them gently. Not to forget, just to grow. I sat with that thought, sipping my tea, not expecting anything more to happen that day. But deep down, I knew this was the part of the story where something had finally settled. Not with a bang, not with a dramatic confrontation or a tearful hug. Just two people seeing each other for the first time, not as versions of the past, but as the people they were now. Weeks passed. Quietly, naturally. Not like a fade out, more like a shift into something less urgent. Mia and I didn't become best friends overnight. There were no grand reunions or emotional breakthroughs over wine and old photos. But something had rooted itself in the spaces we used to fill with competition. Something slower, steadier, more real. She started stopping by my office sometimes, not for long, just enough to drop off updated reports or casually ask about project directions. No performative flattery, no hidden motives, just conversation. Honest and short. I answered when I had time. I listened when it mattered. And little by little, the distance between us wasn't something to cross anymore. It was something we simply walked through. The notebook I'd given her eventually came back to me. Not returned directly, but left on my desk one evening with a ribbon tied around it and a single card tucked inside. It didn't say much. Just a small note in her handwriting. Still learning. But thanks for teaching me without ever trying to teach me. I had kept that card in the back sleeve of my own journal. Not because I needed the reminder, but because it was nice knowing she meant it. At work, Mia thrived. Not by climbing over others or pushing herself into the spotlight, but by becoming the kind of leader who gave space instead of taking it. She led the mentorship program with precision and patience. She defended the interns when their ideas were overlooked. She started asking more about system logic, trying to understand the technology behind the budget she managed, not because she had to, but because curiosity had replaced insecurity. I watched all of it happen without taking credit. That was never the point. Growth isn't about applause. It's about what you do when no one's clapping. And she finally understood that. One Thursday afternoon, HR forwarded a note that made me pause. A junior analyst had written a testimonial about the mentorship program, saying Mia had been the first person in a corporate setting who made her feel heard, not tolerated. At the end of the message, she'd written something that stuck with me. It's not always the loudest person who creates change. Sometimes, it's the person who makes room for others to be loud. I saved the message, not for validation, just because it reminded me why I started this journey in the first place. Not to be seen, to build something that could see others. Months later, at the company's year-end reflection event, we gathered again, this time without speeches or stages. Just an open floor mixer with soft music and rows of warm string lights dangling from the ceiling like frozen sparks. People talked in small clusters. Laughter bubbled between bites of dessert. And I moved through the space slowly, unnoticed by most. Just how I liked it. Near the back of the room, I spotted Mia. She wasn't talking, just standing near the wall, arms loosely folded, watching a group of interns laugh over something on a laptop. She looked calm. Not the kind of calm that comes from pretending, but the kind you earn after choosing to let go of needing to prove anything. I approached her. No ceremony, no preamble. She turned and gave me a slight smile. "You still hate events like this?" she asked. "Hate's a strong word," I said. "Dislike with dignity." She laughed, the sound easy, familiar. Not showy, just shared. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I was going to email this, but figured you'd appreciate analog." I opened it. It was a revised proposal for the upcoming fiscal quarter, with integrated projections tied directly to back-end usage data. I scanned the figures. Solid, smart, efficient. "You're getting good at this," I said. She tilted her head. Or maybe I just started listening more, especially to the parts that weren't said out loud. I looked at her. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to guard myself. I didn't have to brace for comparison or deflection. I could just stand there with my sister and not feel smaller for it. We didn't say much else, just exchanged one last nod before the lights dimmed and people began gathering coats. I left before her, slipped out into the cool air, coat collar turned up against the breeze, hands in my pockets. Seattle was still damp, still soft around the edges like it always got in winter. But it didn't feel heavy. It felt like a place that knew how to be quiet without being empty. That night, I curled up on my couch, tea in hand, laptop dimmed, phone silent. I thought back to all the years I had spent building from the shadows, watching from a distance while people measured worth by volume. I used to believe that staying invisible was the only way to protect what I cared about, that the only way to win was to never be a target. But now I saw it differently. Silence wasn't just armor. It could be invitation. It could be space. The kind that lets others breathe without judgment. The kind that holds truth without needing to shout it. A few days later, my mother called. Just to talk. No urgent updates. No big announcements. Just asked how I was doing and told me she'd seen a podcast episode. Someone at her garden club sent her the one where Nate had finally mentioned both founders by name. "We're so proud of you," she said. "We always were. We just didn't know how to show it." I didn't correct her. I just listened. Let her say it the way she needed to. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that's all anyone really wants, to be heard without having to perform. The next Sunday, we returned to the brunch spot. Same old table, same mix of waffles and interruptions. But this time, it felt different. Not because everyone had changed, but because I had. Mia sat across from me again. Still simple. Still quiet. When the server asked if we were ready to order, she looked at me first. Just a glance, small, unspoken. But it said something I finally understood. She saw me. Not as the quiet one, not as the background character, but as the person I had always been, just someone who chose to build instead of broadcast. I nodded. We ordered. We ate. We talked about the company like colleagues. We laughed like sisters. And when the bill came, we split it. Evenly. That was all, but that was everything. As we stepped outside, sunlight filtered through the clouds, warm enough to make people lift their faces. Mia reached for her sunglasses, then paused. "You think we'll ever be completely past it?" I didn't ask what she meant. I just said, "I don't think we have to be past it. We just have to be different because of it." She nodded slowly, then smiled. "Okay, I can live with that." And so could I. We walked in the same direction, not talking, not needing to. Just letting the quiet stay where it belonged, not between us, but around us. Peaceful, unforced, real. Story 2. I used to believe that dedication would eventually be rewarded, until the day I opened that old document folder. That afternoon, I stopped by my parents' house in Salem, Oregon, like I did every weekend. My mother, Denise, wasn't tech-savvy, so I often helped her check bills, organize tax papers, and scan important documents. That 2-story red brick house, the one I had spent nearly a decade financially supporting and helping renovate, tile by tile, felt like a second home to me. "Can you take a look at this for me?" she said, handing me a messy stack of papers before heading back to her orchids in the backyard. I sat down at the dining table, sifting through the pile until my eyes landed on a thick, cream-colored envelope labeled in bold. Estate plan and will. I hesitated, not because I was curious. At least that's what I told myself. But because I wanted to make sure everything was in order. I'd always been the one to worry about things like this. The one who kept the family from falling apart. But as I flipped to the asset distribution page, I felt a tight pressure in my chest. Everything. And I mean everything. My parents owned the house with over $450,000 in savings. The new SUV. Even Mom's wedding ring was clearly stated to go to Samantha, my younger sister, and me. Not a word, not a single mention. Beyond the vague line, we love both our daughters. I clenched the paper, my knuckles turning white. Every memory of working 2 jobs to help pay their mortgage, of driving through snowstorms to deliver Mom's medication, of fixing plumbing, and of replacing shingles. Each of them felt like they had just been slapped out of existence by that cold, printed sentence. I heard my mom re-enter the house. Her footsteps are light behind me. "Hannah, did you find the statement?" I stood up, wheel in hand, and turned around. My voice was calm, unavailing, and calm. "Mom, is this real?" She froze, her eyes glancing at the paper in my hand. "Oh, Hannah, that. What does that mean?" I cut her off, my throat tight, but each word sharp. "A lifetime of caring for you and Dad, and I'm written off like I never existed." My dad, Richard, walked in from the living room just then, coffee mug in hand. He set it down with a sigh, like he was about to comment on the weather. You don't need to react like this, Hannah. You're doing fine, Samantha. She's still figuring things out. I let out a laugh, humorless and dry. Figuring things out. She's 30. She changes jobs every 3 months. Lives off YouTube and can't pay her own phone bill. I'm the one who paid your mortgage for the last 3 years. The one who fixed the roof last winter. The one who's kept this house from falling apart, dollar by dollar. My mom stepped forward, placing a hand over mine as if that could calm me. Don't overthink it. I just wanted your sister to feel secure. I pulled my hand away, nodded slightly in my gaze. Ice cold. Secure. And what about me? The only one who's kept this place standing all these years. They said nothing. I placed the will back on the table like returning a declaration of war. Thanks for showing me where I really stand. I walked to the door without looking back. No one called out behind me. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel hurt. I just felt empty. A quiet, hollow kind of emptiness that chilled me to the bone. I never returned to that house after discovering the will. 2 weeks passed in silence. No calls, no messages, like I had never existed in their world. I told myself, if they had even a shred of conscience, they'd reach out. But instead of an apology or explanation, what I got was a message from Dad Anna. This month's mortgage is due. Can you transfer it soon? The deadline's Friday. I sat frozen, staring at the message in disbelief. Part of me almost laughed. No mention of what happened, no asking if I was okay. Just a demand. Like I was their default ATM. I typed back every word like ice. I think Samantha can handle it. That house is hers now, right? Then I set my phone down and didn't wait for a reply. 10 minutes later, the screen lit up again. This time it was Mom. Hannah, don't do this. We need to talk. I didn't answer. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry anymore. Just a kind of ruthless clarity had taken the place of every fragile hope I once held. For years, I believed my sacrifices would be acknowledged. I was wrong, and I had no interest in playing savior anymore. 3 days later, the next message came from Samantha. You're overreacting. Mom and Dad didn't mean it like that. You've always been independent, and I'm just not. You know that. I typed slowly, each word cutting through my sister's fake mask. Then prove you deserve what you've been given. Start by paying the mortgage. No response. Another week passed in silence until one Monday morning, while I was sipping coffee in my kitchen. My phone buzzed with a transfer request for exactly $2 $900 from my mom. No message. Just a cold withdrawal request. As emotionless as the way they'd written me out of everything, I hit decline without a second's hesitation. Minutes later, the phone rang. It was Mom. I let it ring to the fourth. Buzz then declined the call. A message followed immediately. Hannah, I know you saw it. Why did you decline? I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and replied, because it's no longer my responsibility. Ask Samantha. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had control. I wasn't the one scrambling to fix cracks I didn't create. I wasn't sacrificing my entire youth to patch up other people's failures. 3 days later, Samantha texted again. You're being so selfish. Didn't you always say family comes first? I read that message over and over. Family? The family she was talking about was the same one that treated me like an outsider, like a walking wallet. I replied with one sentence. Family is about fairness and respect, not using someone until they're no longer useful. After that, there were no more messages. Silence settled over everything, but this time it didn't feel lonely. It felt like relief. A release from a burden I'd carried for far too long. But deep down, I knew this silence was only the beginning, because they'd be back when no one else would help. When the house was at risk of foreclosure, or when Samantha, with all that inheritance, still wouldn't know how to pay a bill on time. And when that moment came, I'd be ready. Not to save them, but to show them that I was no longer the one who would sacrifice. Without so much as a thank you, the next message from Samantha came near midnight, while I was halfway through a historical novel and sipping hot tea. The phone lit up, and I didn't even need to open it to guess the tone. You're blowing this way out of proportion. I scrolled and kept reading. Everyone's already stressed out. Why are you choosing now to be dramatic? It's just a few payments. You've always done it. A dry laugh slipped from my lips without any humor at all. Just a few payments. Easy to say when you've never paid a utility bill in your life. I typed back, I'm not being dramatic, I'm being clear. And you better get used to it. Less than a minute later, she replied, You're seriously selfish. Don't be surprised if Mom and Dad don't forgive you. I set the phone down for the first time in years. I didn't feel guilty. I wasn't haunted by what if they're upset or obsessed with being the good daughter. I had crossed the line between being exploited and standing up for myself. The next day, I called the bank and requested my name be removed from the joint account used for the mortgage. I also contacted the utility companies and canceled all the auto payments I'd been secretly handling for years. I deleted the bill reminders on my phone like a small ceremony, marking the end of my role in their household. That night, I cleaned up my tiny apartment, played my favorite playlist, and bought myself a chocolate cake I'd always loved, but never bought because the money always had to go toward more important things. I started sleeping soundly. I woke up without the jolt of a payment notification. I went to work without feeling like I was dragging 3 other adults on my back. I even signed up for an online art class, something I dreamed about for years but always pushed aside because I didn't have time or really wasn't allowed to be selfish. And as my life started to breathe on its own again, the knocks from the past came louder. Early the following week, my mom Denise called. I didn't answer. A message came right after Hannah. "We need to talk. Your sister doesn't know how to pay the internet bill. Can you help?" I didn't respond. 2 days later, another one. The landline got cut. She says she can't log in. I don't know what to do. I read the message, then opened the bookshelf and pulled out the old notebook where I'd once written down every password, billing schedule, and customer service number. Every time my parents didn't know what to do, they called me every time Samantha forgot a payment. I handled it. This time I closed the notebook and put it back. I wasn't their assistant. I wasn't the backbone of a system that erased me the second I stopped being useful. 3 days later, another message from Samantha landed in my inbox. "Are you kidding me right now? The power's about to be shut off. Are you really going to let that happen to our family?" I replied with just one sentence. "Now I'm just letting everyone take responsibility for their own choices." Silence. I didn't hear anything for several more days until one morning. A call came from an unexpected number. Mrs. Lorraine, the neighbor who'd lived next to my parents for the last 20 years. "Your mom asked if I knew anyone selling houses. I think they're not managing well anymore." I thanked her, then hung up. I didn't feel smug. I didn't smile, but I didn't cry either. I just sat by the window, watching sunlight spill through the trees out front, and realized something. For the first time in my life, I wasn't being crushed by duty or guilt. I had chosen to step out of the cycle, and I wasn't going back. The first message came on Monday morning from someone I didn't expect. "Mr. Walter, the neighbor who'd lived next door to my parents for over 20 years. Hannah, are your parents okay?" Denise asked what day it was. She thought she got the date wrong, but she just got a letter from the bank. It clearly says, "Notice of foreclosure." I stared at the screen, so it had happened faster than I expected. For weeks, since I stopped all support for the house, I once kept it from falling apart, to finally start collapsing. An hour later, my mom called. I didn't answer. A message followed right after the ring. "Hannah, please, we really need you right now. It's serious." I read it, then set the phone down like it had nothing to do with me. But in truth, my chest still felt heavy. I had once thought this moment would bring some twisted sense of satisfaction, but it didn't. Only a hollow, aching fatigue. Maybe because I was too used to cleaning up after others. I didn't reply. 2 days later, for the first time in weeks, Samantha showed up at my door. She stood there in a wrinkled hoodie, no makeup, clutching a messy stack of documents. Her eyes gave away the panic. "I just need 5 minutes," she said, breathless. "Just 5 minutes, Hannah." I crossed my arms, blocking the doorway. Not a single ounce of sympathy in my eyes. "Are you here to ask for money?" "Not money," she blurted out, her voice shaky. "I just need your help talking to the bank. I don't understand the terms they're using. I am overwhelmed. What about the inheritance you got?" I asked, my tone as casual as commenting on the weather. She looked down and mumbled, "It's tied up in an investment portfolio. If I withdraw now, there's a penalty." I didn't think it would spiral this fast. I raised an eyebrow. "Yet you signed for everything without hesitation. I thought Mom and Dad had it under control. They said it was all set." I didn't think. "Exactly. You didn't think?" Like always. Samantha fell silent. I stepped out and pulled the door closed behind me. This is the lesson you need to learn. Everyone stumbles, but no one grows. If someone's always there to catch them, you're really going to let them lose the house. I'm not letting anything happen. They made their choice. Now they live with it. I turned away, leaving Samantha standing alone in the building's hallway. 3 days later, I ran into Ben, an old classmate turned real estate agent, at a networking event at the local art center. I was just about to tell him about the photo project I'd been working on when he interrupted. Eyes wide, "Hey, is your parents' house on Vine Street?" I nodded. "Someone on my team mentioned them. Sounds like they're urgently looking to sell. The old house needs work. High foreclosure risk. Are you doing okay?" I gave a faint smile. "I'm fine. I guess they're not." Then it looked like he wanted to say more but decided against it. That night, I opened my laptop and spotted an email from a legal aid organization I volunteered with back in college. They were recruiting mentors for a new program helping seniors manage housing debt. I smiled softly. Life had a strange way of circling back. I sat quietly for a long moment before starting the application. Not for my parents, not for Samantha. For me. The one who had finally learned to let go. I didn't need to save the old house anymore. But if I could use what I'd been through to keep someone else from falling into that same cycle, that would be worth it. Saturday afternoon, I had just wrapped up a photography workshop and returned to my quiet little apartment, expecting nothing more than a hot cup of tea and a peaceful evening. But as I pulled into the parking lot, I saw a familiar silver minivan parked near the gate. 4 years ago, I had co-signed for that van when my dad, Richard, could no longer make the payments. I transferred the title to him last year as a final gesture of trust. Now it sat there like a bitter reminder. I got out of my car, walking slowly. My parents stood waiting near the building entrance. Samantha stood a bit behind, clutching her purse, eyes full of barely concealed worry. I said nothing. I stopped a few steps away, arms crossed, waiting. My mother, Denise, spoke first. Her voice was trembling. "Hannah, I'm sorry we had to come here, but things have gotten out of hand. The bank's coming to reassess the property next week." My father continued, his voice lower and worrier than I'd ever heard. "We made a mistake. I know that. But if the house is taken, your mother won't be able to handle it." I looked straight at him, my gaze colder than it had ever been. "Then why, when writing the will, did you decide I wasn't worth including?" He dropped his eyes, fingers fidgeting with the edge of his coat. "Back then we thought you'd be fine. You've always been strong. But Samantha, I interrupted, gets to fail, gets forgiven, and inherits everything." It turned to face my sister. She pressed her lips together and said nothing. No denial, no excuse. I gave away my youth. I said, my voice quiet, but every word sharp, without conditions. And in return, I got disregard and the assumption that Hannah will take care of it. I'm not in that role anymore. My mother's tears fell. "We didn't know it would come to this. Can't you help? Just a little, just for a few months until things stabilize?" I shook my head, a breeze in my chest, sweeping away years of obligation. "I'm not saying no because I can't help. I'm saying no because if I do, everyone will go right back to believing they never need to change." Samantha finally spoke, her voice small and broken. "I didn't realize it would get so complicated. I thought it just needed time. I didn't think you'd walk away so fast." I looked at her for the first time in weeks. "I didn't walk away fast. I warned you. I waited. I hoped. But our family chose to ignore all of it. So this is really the end," my mom whispered, tears still fresh on her cheeks. I looked at her. The woman who once rocked me to sleep, who I'd brought medicine to, taken to the ER and cooked for after my dad retired. And I saw clearer than ever the line between blood and actual love. "I didn't end this," I said. "It ended the moment you decided who deserved to be named, and who didn't." No one said a word. The late autumn wind whistled through the bare trees, carrying with it a chill that no jacket could warm. I stepped up onto the porch, pulled out my keys, and unlocked the door. Before walking inside, I turned back one last time. "I hope you find a way, but I'm no longer the lifeline for this family." I looked at Samantha and spoke slowly. "If you truly want to grow up, this is your chance. I've stepped off the merry-go-round, now it's your turn." I walked in and shut the door behind me. The sound of the wind in the hallway drowned out their footsteps as they left. I stood quietly in my living room, afternoon sunlight, casting a long beam across the floor through the glass. No tears, no heartbreak, just a silence, peaceful. I felt that after that final confrontation, they'd go quiet. I had hoped the truth would make them reflect and quietly step back out of pride. But I overestimated the self-awareness of people who've always lived off others. A week later, I got a message from Olivia, a close coworker at the art center. "Hannah, are you on Facebook? You should check your mom's page. She's posting some unbelievable stuff." My hand trembled slightly as I typed Denise Baker into the search bar. Her timeline was filled with emotional posts, flower photos, and inspirational quotes. But what made me freeze was one standout post with a picture of our old house attached. It's heartbreaking when your own daughter turns her back on family, abandoning sick and aging parents, and refusing to help in our time of need. After everything we sacrificed for her, over 80 shares, the comments were full of sympathy, comfort, and judgment for the ungrateful child. I bit my lip scrolling further and saw another post. "This one's from my dad Richard. We thought Hannah was someone who loved her family, but when we needed her the most, she walked away without a word. The house is about to be taken, and she acts like nothing's happening." Then came a post from Samantha with a clearly mocking tone. "Some people are only kind when they're above you looking down, but when family asks them to step down and help, they choose silence. That's today's version of strong, I guess. I gripped my phone tighter. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even shocked. I was tired. When guilt didn't work on me anymore, they turned to public shaming. But they forgot one thing. I wasn't silent anymore. That night, I opened my laptop and logged into my Facebook, which I rarely used. I made a single post. No background color, no fancy design, but every word was clear as daylight. My family is sharing a one-sided story. So to be fair, here's the truth from my side. I attached a photo of the will with Samantha's name as the sole beneficiary. I posted snapshots of the mortgage payments, utility bills, and insurance, all under my name. Then I included the last text I got from my mom, asking for $2 $900.0 to save the house. I ended with one line. My silence wasn't consent. I was just waiting for the right moment to tell the truth. That moment is now within 10 minutes. The first comment appeared. "Hannah, you seriously did all of this? I can't believe it." An old friend commented, "You're one of the kindest people I know. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." Then, one by one, people started sharing the post. Some who had known my parents chimed in, many expressing surprise. I always thought Samantha lived pretty recklessly. Now, it makes sense. No one should be taken advantage of like that. Especially not by their own family. My post spread quickly, not because it was sensational, but because it was real. It was honest, and it didn't shy away. 2 days later, my mom took down all her posts. My dad deactivated his account. Samantha changed her profile picture to a black and white flower, the vague, dramatic move she always made when things slipped out of her control. I didn't respond. I didn't post anything else. I just sat in my apartment, listening to the rain tap softly on the window. And for the first time, I felt justice on my side. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need them to bow their heads. I just needed them to stop. And it seemed, finally, they understood that I wasn't someone they could manipulate anymore. One post, enough to end the years I'd been forced into silence. And now I was writing the next chapter. Not on social media, but in real life. Since that day I posted, I haven't heard a word from Mom, Dad, or Samantha. Everything has been as still as a forgotten lake after a storm, but not the silence of waiting. This was the silence of acceptance. They had lost the only person who always came back after they broke everything. I was the opposite. I began to live. Every Monday morning I headed to the art center to teach my first photography class for high school students. The way their eyes lit up, holding a camera for the first time, the way they viewed the world through a lens. It reminded me that not everyone sees the same thing, and sometimes you have to choose your own angle. In the evenings, I took a part-time video editing course, a skill I'd always dreamed of learning but put off because my family needed me. Now no one needs me, and for the first time in my life, that felt freeing. I started going on evening walks, unhurried and carefree. I baked on weekends and posted pictures on Instagram without worrying about being called fake. I made new friends in class, people who didn't know me as the one who held the family together, and because of that, I finally got to just be me. While I was learning how to breathe across town, the house at 218 Elm Street began popping up on real estate listings. A friend of mine, Marcus, now a realtor, texted me, "Hannah, your parents' house is up for sale. Asking $390,000, but no offers. It looks like they couldn't fix the roof or the faulty wiring." I wasn't surprised. No one to fix the fuse box at midnight. No one to replace the water heater or call the repair guy in time. No more me. That house had survived because of me, and now it reflected the truth. Neglected, run down, and with no one left who could keep it standing. I heard one more update from Lorraine, the elderly neighbor. She called just to check in, but before hanging up, she mentioned it casually. "Oh, and it seems like Samantha's moved back in with your parents. I see her doing the grocery runs often. She doesn't look too happy." I looked up from my laptop and took a sip of my still warm coffee. In the past, hearing something like that would have made my chest tighten with worry. But now I simply shrugged. Maybe what Samantha needed most was to experience the instability she used to so easily ignore. I wasn't glad they were struggling. I just no longer wanted to carry the weight of choices that weren't mine. For the first time in 10 years, my savings account was steadily growing. I booked a fall trip to Seattle to photograph the changing leaves. I put a deposit down on a new semi-pro camera, something I used to consider an unnecessary luxury. I was learning to take care of myself the way I once cared for an entire family. I also started writing again, not defensive posts, but a blog about breaking away from toxic family dynamics. Some entries were widely shared. Many people messaged me, thanking me for saying what they never had the words to express. And on a rainy afternoon, while I was editing photos in my favorite cafe, my phone buzzed with a notification from a real estate site. The price dropped by $30.0 in the property at 218 Elm. Owner seeking urgent sale. I looked at the photo of the house. Dark roof tiles, rotting fence, peeling window frames. It used to symbolize duty, pressure, and expectation. Now it was just a house waiting to be rescued. And I wasn't the rescuer anymore. I tapped hide notification, closed my phone, and smiled a soft smile. Lighter than air, but deeper than any sigh I'd swallowed over the years. I didn't belong there anymore. One early winter afternoon, I was walking around Liberty Lake with my new camera. The golden light of dusk cut through bare branches, casting soft beams across the water. I stopped, raised my camera, and captured the perfect frame. A little boy running in the distance, his mother behind him, laughing and calling out. In that moment, I realized some things aren't meant to be held onto because they were never truly yours to begin with. I used to believe family was something you could never lose. That blood was an unbreakable bond. But now I know the thing that makes a family real isn't DNA, it's respect and gratitude. I had given everything in hopes of being seen. And in return, I became the name left off a will, the one called dramatic for refusing to carry others' burdens any longer. I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. I had just let go. They still lived there, in that old house, now listed for the third time. Word was, whenever someone came to view it, Samantha tried to act like a responsible homeowner. But when asked about maintenance records or repair bills, she'd just smile awkwardly, because all those years, no one ever taught her what to do. I never went back. Not once. My mother once sent me a handwritten letter, sealed in a familiar blue envelope with handwriting I knew by heart. She wrote about her sleepless nights, not knowing where to begin again. That your father isn't as strong as he used to be. At the end, she wrote, I don't know how much time we have left to fix things, but if you're willing, I'm still here. I folded the letter. I didn't tear it. I didn't reply. I placed it in the drawer beneath my desk, next to undeveloped photos and half-finished drafts. Things that needed time to be understood and accepted. I didn't hate them. I just no longer had the strength to keep sacrificing without being heard. I kept working, kept teaching, and kept creating and capturing. I even held a small photo exhibit at a friend's cafe showcasing images that traced my journey to healing, early mornings in the park, golden light on quiet streets, an elderly woman's thin hands holding a warm mug, and a single flower fallen on cracked pavement. A middle-aged woman came up to me afterward, shook my hand and said, I don't know why, but every photo of yours feels like it's speaking for someone who's been silent for a long time. I smiled, saying nothing because she was right. I had spent my life staying quiet, for peace, for the role of the good daughter, for the hope that enough giving would earn me the love I longed for. But now I've chosen a different kind of peace. Not one that comes from others' approval, but from finally choosing myself. I've learned how to love myself unconditionally. I've learned to say no without guilt. I've learned to let others face the consequences of their own choices. And most importantly, I've learned not to look back. They're still my family, on paper, in memory. But they're no longer at the center of my every decision. I don't know what the future holds, whether there'll be a reunion or if things will remain as they are. But that doesn't matter anymore, because in the end, I finally understand. Family isn't just the people who share your last name. Family is the people who value your presence, the ones who don't treat your kindness like a duty, the ones who make you feel seen and chosen. And if none of them can do that, that's okay. Because I have a family, me, and I don't need to look anywhere else. My story isn't a tragedy, it's an awakening. I once believed that love and sacrifice would always be rewarded. That family was unshakable. But the truth is, no one deserves to be taken for granted, not even by their own blood. I've learned to set boundaries, to walk away when necessary, and to choose myself without regret. Now I live with lightness, freedom, and peace. Not because they changed, but because I changed myself. What do you think about Hannah's decision? Was she too harsh, or was this the only way to truly protect herself? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about real family life.